The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 15th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This and all subsequent sessions will be available on makara.us under the subheading Moria Federation Webinars. Okay, let's take a look at what HPB and Colonel Olcott are up to. This month finds them in the town of Meerut in northern India, in the company of the renowned yogi Swami Dayanand. Even today, the Swami is honored for his teachings. That's him in the middle of the backdrop during a recent ceremony attended by India's Prime Minister. This happened in 2018. In this reading, we will be sitting in on a dialogue between Colonel Olcott and the Swami. This is a little longer than our usual reading from old diary leaves, but I think you'll find it interesting. So can we get a reader for this and the next page?
Okay, so let's start with Asha, please. And then after her, you're self-muted.
And you could read the title as well.
Actually, I'm on the road and I have an iPhone, so I can't see the print.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we would rather you didn't run into
No, I'm a passenger.
Oh.
Okay.
Still,
Well, thanks for tuning in. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Let me see. Barbara, can you read that for us? Barbara, are you there? Can you read that for us? I show your mic is open, but we're not hearing you. Now you're self-muted. Okay, let's go to someone else.
We'll come back to you, Barbara.
Catherine, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Okay, we're not going very well. Where's Michael? There we go. Michael, can you read that for us, please?
I am here.
Thank you.
Swami Dayananda Saraswati on yoga. After a halt at Allahabad, we reached Meerut on the 30th. The entire local branch of the Arya Samaj greeted us at the railway station, escorted us to the residence of Mr. Shyanarain, and soon after Swami Dayanand called. In the presence of his followers, we opened a discussion intended to draw out his real views on yoga and the alleged siddhis, or human psycho-spiritual powers. Our debate will be found reported in a full digest in the Theosophist for December 1880, and I should content myself with referring my readers to it, but for the fact that only a very small proportion of them have probably access to that volume, and it is too interesting to the general reader on yoga and important in its historical connection with our society to have it passed over or ignored. I shall, therefore, reproduce its substance herewith as follows.
Go ahead.
The first question propounded to the Swami was whether yoga was a true science, or but a metaphysical speculation. Whether Patanjali described psychical powers attainable by man, and whether they had been attained, well, let me close so I can see the whole, had been attained or not. The Swami's answer was that yoga was true and based upon a knowledge of the laws of nature. It was then asked whether these powers could still be acquired, or had the time passed by. The answer was that nature's laws are unchangeable and illimitable, that what had been done once could be done now. Not only can the man of today learn to do all the things described by the ancient writers, but he himself, the Swami, could teach the methods to anyone who might sincerely wish to take up that course of life. Many had come to him professing their desire and asserting their ability to command success. He had tried 3, but all failed. One was a resident of Agra. They began well, but soon grew impatient of having to confine themselves to what they regarded as trivial efforts, and, to their surprise, broke down suddenly. Yoga is the most difficult science of all to learn, and few men are capable of acquiring it now. He was asked if there are now living any real yogis who can at will produce the wonderful phenomena described in Aryan books. His reply was that there are such living men. Their number is small. They live in retired places, and in their proper persons seldom or never appear in public. Their secrets are never communicated by them to the profane, nor do they teach their secret science, vidya, except to such as upon trial they find deserving.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, a new reader for this page.
Okay. Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Up to what day, hour, or minute of his own bodily life can the yogi exercise this power of transferring his atma, or inner self, to the body of another? Answer. Until the last minute, or even second, of his natural term of life. He knows beforehand, to a second, when his body must die, and until that second strikes, he may project his soul into another person's body if one is ready for his occupancy. But should he allow that instant to pass, then he can do no more. The cord is snapped forever, and the yogi, if not sufficiently purified and perfected to be enabled to obtain moksha, must follow the common law of rebirth. The only difference between his case and that of other men is that he, having become a far more intellectual, good, and wise being than they, is reborn under better conditions. Question. Can the yogi prolong his life to the following extent? Say the natural life of his own body is 70 years. Can he, just before the death of that body, enter the body of a child of 6 years? Live in that another term of 70 years, remove from that to another, and live it in a third 70? Answer. He can, and can thus prolong his stay on earth to about the term of 400 years. Question. Can the yogi thus pass from his own body into that of a woman? Answer. With as much ease as a man can, if he chooses, put on himself the dress of a woman, so he can put on over his own atma her physical form. Externally, he would then be in every physical aspect and relation a woman. Internally, himself. Question. I've met 2 such, that is to say, 2 persons who appeared women, but who were entirely masculine in everything but the body. One of them, you remember, we visited together in Benares, in a temple on the bank of the Ganges. Answer. Yes, Maji.
Yeah, if you may remember that in an earlier reading in Old Diary Leaves, there was a section on the visitation of Maji, or Maji. Thanks, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Up next, another reader, please.
Antoinette, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, question. How many kinds of yoga practice are there? Answer. 2, Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. Under the former, the student undergoes physical trials and hardships for the purpose of subjecting his physical body to the will. For example, the swinging of one's body from a tree, head downwards, at a little distance from 5 burning fires, etc. In Raja Yoga, nothing of the kind is required. It is a system of mental training by which the mind is made the servant of the will. The one, Hatha Yoga, gives physical results. The other, Raja Yoga, spiritual powers. He who would become perfect in Raja must have passed through the training in Hatha. Question. But are there not persons who possess the siddhis or powers of the Raja Yoga without ever having passed through the terrible ordeal of the Hatha? I recently have met 3 such in India, and they themselves told me they had never submitted their bodies to torture. Answer. Then they practiced Hatha in their previous birth. Question. Explain, if you please, how we may distinguish between the real and the false phenomena when produced by one supposed to be a yogi. The answer. Phenomena and phenomenal. Appearances are of 3 kinds. The lowest are produced by sleight of hand or dexterity. The second by chemical or mechanical aids or appliances. The third and highest by the occult powers of man. Whenever anything of a startling nature is exhibited by either of the first 2 means, and it is falsely represented to have been of an unnatural or supernatural or miraculous character, that is properly called a tamasha or dishonest deception. But if the true and the correct explanation of such surprising effect is given, then it should be classed as a simple exhibition of scientific or technical skill, and is to be called
Vyavahara.
Vyavahara Videya. Effects produced by the sole exercise of the trained human will without apparatus or mechanical aids are true yoga.
Thank you. Okay, next. New reader, please.
Okay, let's see. Eric, can you read for us, please? Okay, not there. Let's, Francis, can you read that for us, please? The other Francis.
Yes. Define the nature of the human Atma. In the Atma, there are 24 powers. Among these are will, passivity, action, determined perception or knowledge, strong memory, etc. When all these powers are brought to bear upon the external world, the practitioner produces effects which are properly classed under the head of physical science. When he applies them to the internal world, that is spiritual philosophy, yoga. Antar yoga, or inner yoga, when 2 men talk to each other from far distant places by means of the telegraph, that is Bhagayata Vidya, when without any apparatus and by employing their knowledge of natural forces and currents, it is Yoga Vidya. It is also Yoga Vidya when an adept in the science causes articles of any kind to be brought to him from a distance or sends them from himself to any distant place. In either case, without visible means of transportation, such as railways, messengers, or whatnot. The former is called Hakarshan, attraction, the later Prishana. The ancients thoroughly understood the laws of the attraction and repulsion of all things in nature between each other, and the yoga phenomena are based upon that knowledge. The yogi changes or intensifies these attractions and repulsions at will. Question, what are the prerequisites for one who wishes to acquire these powers? A, answer. These are a desire to learn, such a desire as the starving man has for food, or a thirsty one for water, an intense and eager yearning, perfect control over the passions and desires, chastity, pure companionship, pure food, that which brings into the body none but pure influences. The frequency of a pure locality, one free from vicious taint of any kind, pure air and seclusion. He must be endowed with intelligence, that he may comprehend the principles of nature, concentrativeness, that his thoughts may be prevented from wandering, and self-control, that he may always be master over his passions and weaknesses. 5 things he must relinquish: ignorance, egotism, conceit, passion, sensual, selfishness, and fear of death.
Thank you. And next up, I think this is the only known photograph of Dayanand. He was born in something like 1821, so he would have been, in his mid-50s, 40s, 50s, when contacted by HPV and Colonel Olcott. So can we get I think this is the final one. Let's see. Yeah. Can we get a final reader for this section?
Vera, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Question. You do not believe then that the yogi acts contrary to natural laws? Answer. Never. Nothing happens contrary to the laws of nature. By Hatha Yoga, one can accomplish a certain range of minor phenomena, as, for instance, to draw all his vitality into a single finger, or, when in dhyana, a state of mental quiescence, to know another's thoughts. By Raja Yoga, he becomes a siddha. He can do whatever he wills and know whatever he desires to know, even languages which he has never studied. But all these are in strict harmony with natural laws. Question. I have occasionally seen inanimate articles duplicated before my eyes, such as letters, coins, pencils, jewelry. How is this to be accounted for? Answer. In the atmosphere are the particles of every visible thing in a highly diffused state. The yogi, knowing how to concentrate these, does so by the exercise of his will, and forms them into any shape of which he can picture to himself this model. Colonel Olcott asked the Swami what he would call certain phenomena heretofore produced by Madame Blavatsky in the presence of witnesses, such as the causing of a shower of roses to fall in a room at Benares last year, the ringing of bells in the air, the causing of the flame of a lamp to gradually diminish until it almost went out, and then at command to blaze up again to the top of the chimney, without touching the regulator in either instance, etc. The answer was that these were phenomena of yoga. Some of them might be imitated by tricksters, and then would be mere tamasha. But these were not of that class. I think this one of the simplest, clearest, most sententious, and most suggestive digest of the Indian view of the high science of yoga in literature.
Thank you. Okay, so that last comment is basically Colonel Olcott's statement about this question and answer series. All right. So last month we left off with HPB's commentary on verse 6 of the first stanza of
Francis?
Dzyan. Yeah.
Asha has typed in a comment here. She says, I have met, I think she means Swami, I'm going to get this wrong, Dayananda, and attended his talk several times. He passed away recently. He has a huge ashram in Pennsylvania, and one of his students, Swami Tadat Nada has an ashram here in New Jersey. I'm sorry, Ashley, if I butchered those.
BL, you're our go-to Sanskrit scholar. What can I say?
Right.
Yeah, some of these names are pretty tough. Well, that's fascinating. Interesting. That makes me wonder if there isn't another Swami who has taken on the name Dayanand, or if we have one of these miraculous, long-lived yogis, which of course is entirely possible. But in this case, it would be definitely documented. Very interesting. Yeah, somebody would have to look into that. Thanks for that info.
So is it unlikely that this is the same Dayananda he's talking about? How old was Dayananda when he died, love?
Well,
he was 84 and he died a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so that would suggest it would have to be another Dayanand.
Oh, okay.
And also you're saying Dayananda, right?
Yes.
And this is just Dayanand.
Okay, this is from the Chinmay mission, right? Yeah. This is the Dayananda from the Chinmay mission. Very, very famous person too. Okay, sorry. Wrong person. Okay.
Yeah, well, do you happen to know, or does anyone know what if Dayanand has a particular meaning?
Do you know what Dayanand means, love?
Dayanand means someone who is very compassionate.
Anand is bliss, so Dayanand is someone who's compassionate. I know in the word Ananda, Satchitanand. Anand means bliss, so Dayananda is someone who's very compassionate.
So the bliss of compassion.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to know.
He was a pretty amazing person. You could feel his presence when you were with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure
sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought it up anyway. I'm glad you brought it up. It's very interesting. And it brought us to this definition. So that's terrific. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And that makes me wonder, now these photos and images were for Dayanand without the A on the end. So I'm thinking that it was one of the very early photographs of this previous saint, but I'm not 100% now that you've mentioned this other saint. Do you know, from the images that you saw me present, did they look like this Dayananda that you saw? Was he portly, for instance?
You're self-muted.
He was not portly. I love that word portly. I'll use it for myself in future. Better than morbid obesity, isn't it?
No,
he was not. He was not portly. No.
So
I'm pretty sure he was not the same Dayananda.
Yeah, okay.
That Olcott's talking about,
right. Right. So
my apologies. Delete this from the transcript.
No, I think we'd established that it wasn't the same one. My question was whether this imagery that I used was for the earlier one or for the one that you had contact with. And it looks like it was for the earlier one. So that's a good thing. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, here we are on verse 6 of the last stanza of Dzyan. So let's reread this last paragraph. I always like to drop back and punt from where we were so we can get some continuity as much as is possible, moving from month to month here. So if we could get a reader for the verse itself at the top and then followed by the highlight area at the end.
Helen, could you read that for us, please?
Yes. The seven sublime lords and the seven truths had ceased to be. And the universe, the son of necessity, was immersed in paranashpana. B, absolute perfection. Paranirvana, which is yongrub, to be outbreathed by that which is and yet is not. Naught was. Our ideas, in short, on duration and time are all derived from our sensations according to the law of association. Inextricably bound up with the relativity of human knowledge, they nevertheless can have no existence except in the experience of the individual ego, and perish when its evolutionary march dispels the maya of phenomenal existence. What is time, for instance, but the panoramic succession of our states of consciousness? In the words of a master, I feel irritated at having to use these three clumsy words, past, present, and future, miserable concepts of the objective phases of the subjective whole. They are about as ill adapted for the purpose as an axe for fine carving. One has to acquire paramartha, lest one should become too easy a prey to samvriti, is a philosophical axiom.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. So, aside from the dubious assertion that masters get irritated, we discover in this commentary that the apparent divisions of time are an illusion created by, quote, objective phases of the subjective whole, created in our individual and collective consciousness by the laws of association, which is inherent to existence in the three worlds ruled by time and space. You know, it's fascinating to imagine a state of existence where the laws of association do not apply, but this would require that we extend our grasp of reality beyond our individualized, selves. Yet another reason to cultivate self-forgetfulness. So any thoughts or questions about this? This is a very provocative, little encapsulated teaching on the nature of time. Any thoughts? Ideas? Well, let them percolate. If something comes up, I think there's it's a very interesting idea to think about. The fact of existing in the three worlds of human endeavor inherently divides time into this three segments. It's like we ride time in the current moment is this passage through. Whereas the true nature of time encompasses all three simultaneously. So, of course, quite a mind-bending concept. So any thoughts about that before we head into the new material? Okay, actually, let's take a look at the two polar opposite Sanskrit terms presented in this commentary. Could we get a reader for these definitions?
Sure. Let's get an experienced Sanskrit reader, please, Scott.
I thought that was you. Okay. Paramartha, Sanskrit, from parama, highest, sublime, plus artha, comprehension, aim. True or supreme self-consciousness. Also a great mystic work, which according to legend is said to have been delivered to Nagarjuna by ancient initiates. Paramartha, in the view of Buddhist initiates, is that final or ultimate goal possible of attainment in the present sevenfold planetary Manvantara by the striving and advancing adept. When he has overcome, subdued, and transformed the characteristics of the lower quaternary of his sevenfold constitution, so that he lives in the highest part of the upper triad, when he has attained self-conscious living in his own monadic essence, he thereupon attains paramartha, or that absolute consciousness which, because of its freedom from all human qualifications or characteristics, can equally be called absolute unconsciousness. Samvriti, Sanskrit prefix sam, the verbal root of to enclose, to cover or involve, to involve. The holding of false conception, because the percipient ego is enclosed or covered or involved with material energies and powers. Samvriti, hence, may be called the origin of all illusion or Maya.
Right, thank you. Thoughts and questions about this? Or about the previous paragraphs? So the relevant Secret Doctrine statement is one has to acquire paramartha lest one should become too easy a prey to samvriti. That's the context for this. So the threefold illusory experience of time only occurs while in samvriti. Will it gradually, all these Sanskrit terms will become more familiar as they seem so exotic at this point and foreign, and they don't necessarily call up their meaning, but that changes over time. Already, words like manvantara have, become more meaningful. So I'm going to read the footnote myself because it's so full of difficult words, and I had to practice it. In clear words, one has to acquire true self-consciousness in order to understand samvriti, or the origin of delusion. Paramartha is the synonym of the Sanskrit term svasamvedana, or the reflection which analyzes itself. I love that idea. There is a difference in the interpretation of the meaning of paramartha between the Yogacharyas and the Madhyamikas, neither of whom, however, explain the real and true esoteric sense of the expression. See further sloka number 9. Sloka is another term for verse. So we won't worry about the synonym svasambhadana or different interpretations of paramartha just yet. But the comment that paramartha is the reflection which analyzes itself is worth noting. This is, of course, no lower mind analysis or self-analysis, but rather a monadic self-reflection. So, let's see. Any thoughts about that footnote before we head into verse 7? Anyone?
Nope, not yet.
Yeah. So, don't get hung up with these words, or I should say intimidated. Very often the concepts are straightforward enough. You can get a sense of it. So if you're having trouble with the word, just go straight to the concept. Eventually, the two will come together, and it will have more meaning for you.
Okay. Asha has a question.
Yeah, Asha.
Go ahead. You're self-muted. Oh, your hand went. No, I guess you're not the one who had it. Oh. Francis, go ahead, please.
Just re-emphasizing what stood out for me, as Francis just reflected on, the reflection which analyzes itself. The multifold reflection of the one absolute, which eventually clearly reflects the absolute and no longer needs to be the reflection. Very powerful.
Yes, indeed. That would be that would be a definition at the level that we're speaking of here, or of the paramartha level, this sort of multifaceted self-reflection of the absolute upon itself, which basically describes, the nature of the one absolute as it experiences itself in manifestation, right? So the one returning on the path would come to an awareness that there was not other but, I think the term is there's not other but me, that that you recognize your identification with the absolute. So that's the level that this is describing here. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to verse 7. Here we are. Can we get a reader? So does everybody understand how she's breaking this down with the A's and the B's? That which precedes, the cause of existence has been done away with, and then there's an A. So the commentary A is dealing just with that phrase. And then when we get to the B section, it's referring to the visible that was and the invisible that is, rested in eternal non-being, the one being. So that's, in case you hadn't figured that out, that's what's going on with these sections. So if we could get somebody to read the verse 7 and this first paragraph, please.
Victor, can you read that for us, please?
I don't know.
I'll give it a shot.
The causes of existence have been done away with. A, the visible that was and the invisible that is, rested in eternal non-being, the one being. B, the causes of existence mean not only the physical causes known to science, but the metaphysical causes, the chief of which is the desire to exist, an outcome of Mindana and Maya. This desire for a sentient life shows itself in everything, from an atom to a sun, and is a reflection of the divine thought propelled into objective existence, into a law that the universe should exist. According to esoteric teaching, the real cause of that supposed desire and of all existence remains forever hidden, and its first emanations are the most complete abstractions mind can conceive. These abstractions must of necessity be postulated as the cause of the material universe, which presents itself to the senses and intellect, and they underlie the secondary and subordinate powers of nature, which, anthropomorphized, have been worshipped as God and gods by the common herd of every age. It is impossible to conceive anything without a cause. The attempt to do so makes the mind a blank.
Thanks, Victor. Good job. So, thoughts or questions on this first commentary of verse 7? The statement further defines the idea of the sons of necessity, the ineffable divine desire to manifest into sentient life. HBB makes a point that even what appears to be the causal powers of nature are invisibly governed by this will to be, as DK calls it. So here's a chart from the Treatise on Cosmic Fire, which is superimposed on a statue which has the same meaning expressed in the three columns of the chart. The left column represents the source of the desire to manifest. The third column, the manifestation and that which sustains this appearance, is represented by the second column. So if you look starting at the fourth entry under the triple heading, it's like the fifth one down, we have the desire of spirit to manifest in matter, resulting in and sustained by consciousness, followed by the desire of the father for the mother, resulting in and sustained by the son. Then the desire of the monad to express itself as a personality, sustained by the ego, followed by the desire of the knower for the known, expressing itself and sustained by knowledge. And finally, the desire of life for the form aspect, resulting in and sustained by realization. All these represent the threefold expression of the sons of necessity. So it kind of gives you an insight or an esoteric understanding of this threefold statue. My guess is that the first pole is that the point of union is the one in the middle, which is the Vishnu aspect, because it stands connecting the other two. But I don't know this esoteric significance of the statue enough to say that with any authority. But that it seems to me that it would be as it's laid out here. So, any thoughts about this? Okay, let's get back to the commentary. HPB tells us here that the real cause of divine desire that expresses itself as the will to be will, quote, remain forever hidden, followed by a very esoteric phrase, quote, and its first emanations, that is the first emanations of the will to be, are the most complete abstractions mind can conceive. It's the most provocative statement. What are these first emanations? Well, you'll discover as we continue on that they are described in the verses of the upcoming shlokas in graphic detail. These first emanations of the will to be. So, any thoughts or questions about this material? Okay, HPB's next commentary references the statement, it is impossible to conceive anything without a cause. So we'll back up a sentence and start with that. So could we get a reader? Just read the highlighted section.
Michael's got his hand up. Go ahead,
Okay.
Michael, and then please read for us. Oh.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay. The first, what did it say about the
oh, you want me to go back?
What the mind can conceive, and I'm supposing that it's not the human mind that has trouble conceiving this, or it's not the human mind that conceives it to begin with.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, which is when talking about mind, we're not just talking about some incarnate human mind, right? These truths are at such high causal levels that it would seem, at least to me, that no human consciousness could actually compass this material, these realities. So yeah, I think you're right.
It's like the conception that we have scientifically of the Big Bang beginning the universe that we are experiencing. And science is not able to explain how or where this Big Bang originated, why it originated, any of those. It brings up a multitude of questions without answers.
Yeah, basically they can look out at the universe, through the Hubble and see that there's this expansion, and even, nail it down to, the fact that it's been expanding for 13.6 billion years, and therefore formulate the Big Bang Theory. But the next step, which is to explain it, would require causal levels of information that are just simply not part of the current purview of the scientific world.
And if you want to split hairs, it's a hypothesis because it's not able to be proved in any way.
Yeah, at least they've gone that far.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, so let me come back here. There we go.
It is impossible to conceive anything without a cause. The attempt to do so makes the mind a blank. This is virtually the condition to which the mind must come at last when we try to trace back the chain of causes and effects. But both science and religion jump to this condition of blankness much more quickly than is necessary. For they ignore the metaphysical abstractions, which are the only conceivable cause of physical concretions. These abstractions become more and more concrete as they approach our plane of existence, until finally they phenomenalize in the form of the material universe. By a process of conversion of metaphysics into physics, analogous to that by which steam can be condensed into water, and the water frozen into ice.
Thank you, Michael. So, thoughts and questions about this idea? This states one of the fundamental tenets of theosophy, which is also expressed as the third basic postulate in the beginning of a treatise on cosmic fire under the heading, all souls are identical with the oversoul. Even though it's not obvious by that name, it's this Russian doll effect, that each point of light is part of a greater identity. As to the, quote, condition of blankness held by science, though there are definite exceptions, today's science as a whole is just as disinclined to speculate about metaphysical causes. And because they're so accurate, seem to be even more bound to their measuring instruments than they were in the 19th century, even though in the last few decades, these same instruments have suggested the existence of causal energies beyond the physical and beyond their ability to measure. So any thoughts about this before we move on?
Francis?
Yeah.
I'm thinking in terms of as above, so below, and in simpler terms, the soul's appropriation of vehicles for this particular life. You start with the mental body, and you can't see that, and then you appropriate the material for the astral body, but you can't see that until actual birth occurs and the form takes shape. And then a little bit closer to us, but not quite on this level, I think we see the same thing with the rounds and the globes. And, the first couple of them are, they're not visible. And then there's that one that becomes visible, and then they become invisible again as they go back up in the globes and the rounds and whatnot. Yeah. So that's one way that I think I'm able to at least comprehend some of this. This is on such a much greater scale, but it makes sense to me knowing what I know about the appropriation of vehicles and the rounds and globes and whatnot.
Yeah, the only difference would be that those globes are in some ways, not exactly, but in some ways co-equal. That is to say, they're all globes. Now, they do have different qualities, but what this refers to is this concept that is encapsulated by the idea that we're cells in the body of the one about the one in whom we live and move and have our being, which is the planetary logos. And of course, there's many intermediate steps of a certain phase of unity. The first of those being our own constitution, right? We have personalities, the soul and the monad. They have this this quality of of the greater octave of our existence, right? As do all aspects of manifestation are subject to this law, right? So, yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts about this? Okay. Let's move on to section B. Also, Martha can read, so if you need a new reader, there's another one.
No, she can't.
Oh, she can't. Oh, well, you know, and I don't.
Do I need a new reader?
No, I don't. No, you don't. I thought you could. So, we need a reader for this, though. So.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Let me see. I was going to go to, there she is. Lona, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The visible that was and the invisible that is rested in eternal non-being, the one being.
So the reason I just highlighted that is because that's what the commentary is referencing here.
Yes.
So go ahead.
The idea of eternal non-being, which is the one being, will appear a paradox to anyone who does not remember that we limit our ideas of being to our present consciousness of existence, making it a specific instead of a generic term. An unborn infant, could it sink in our acceptation? It's difficult to read the letters here of that term, would necessarily limit its conception of a being in a similar manner to the intrauterine life, which alone is known and where it endeavor to express to its consciousness the idea of life after birth, death to it. It would, in the absence of the data to go upon and of faculties to comprehend such data, properly expressed that life as non-being, which is real being.
Okay, thank you. So any thoughts or ideas about this section? Since the non and non-being refers to the complete absence of the form aspect, as well as all intervening causal levels, it could also be described as beingness or pure beingness, which stands always in a numinal or causal relation to any specific being, no matter how exalted. This is why it is eternal and thus not bound by cyclic appearance. So HPB's metaphor of an unborn child seems particularly apt. The idea that life after birth would seem to it like death can be extended to life after physical plane life, which is also seen as death. It's just that invisible stage that stands beyond, right? And is therefore perceived as non-being. But it's just a relative gradation of beingness. So any thoughts about this idea? The idea of eternal non-being, which is the one being.
Yes, Michael has his hand up.
Yeah, we also struggle with the differentiation between our physical existence, which appears solid, and the life or energy, using the terms as the same, of what we really are, and everything that is around us. Everything is energy. Everything is life. And so when we look at a table, it appears solid, but it's not.
Right.
Yeah. You know, the window, we can see through the window, Okay, it's there, but it's not, which is an interesting concept. And you know, it's made out of sand, right?
Yeah.
So when we can begin to picture or move our mind from everything being solid to everything being energy, we perhaps can begin to get a glimmer of the idea of eternal non-being.
Yes. Well, while you're in incarnation, we're inherently sensually or sensorially biased. You know, we tend to think that which the sense reveals is real, and that which it doesn't isn't. And that extends to that which is invisible, particularly, is not real. It is the bias of modern science, right? And we absolutely, even when you philosophically know this to be a wrong idea, it's still very difficult to reverse the bias, which is that the more sensorially present it is, the less real it is, because the more physical, right? To think that that non-being, which is the one being, is infinitely more true or real than our samvritic reality of the three worlds of human endeavor. It's an incredibly difficult bias to overcome, and I think it's only done ultimately through meditation. Study and meditation. Yeah,
we have to start somewhere. If we don't embark on this journey, we're trapped in form forever.
Yeah,
the illusion of form.
That's correct. Of course, every time you die, you get the lesson yet again. That what you just thought was real isn't any longer. And the perspective, I'm sure, snaps into focus. Even if you're not an occultist, but for those who also go through some training, then when you pass into the next levels of existence, you can make some sense of what's going on and add to your knowledge base that way.
When we pass through the change called birth, we lose the instruction manual.
Yeah, temporarily.
But as we're embarking on the path and make progress on the path, perhaps instead of losing the entire instruction manual, we keep with us a snippet, a sentence or a paragraph here and there.
Yeah, and also there's the sense of its importance and of familiarity, because it's not about remembering specific information so much as the feeling that you've been here before. Anybody who's hung with this webinar series this long has a feeling for this material, which, now for some 45 pages has been talking about this concept of eternal non-being and one being, right? And so that suggests that attraction to this philosophy suggests a familiarity, even though we have to rebuild it in terms of the concrete understanding. It suggests that it has a revisitation rather than it being the first time that we're coming across this material.
And I would surmise as well that it may be the first time, quote unquote, to review the Secret Doctrine itself, but the material we've been exposed to over many incarnations.
Right. The ancient wisdom teachings in
Yes.
one form or another, indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
And then
Okay.
Francis
Yeah.
has his hand up too.
Good.
Okay, oops. There, go ahead, please, Francis.
Quick observation of the final sense there, non-being, which is real being. I'm reminded of a saying a guru once said that being is greater than doing, as we were just discussing. Locked in the sensorial aspect of physical nature, we are essentially doing through the senses. But the true existence is in non-being, which is the real being. Being is greater than doing.
Yeah. There's some confusion with this idea of non-being, right? The being that's referred to in non-being is existence, right? Whereas in beingness, we're talking about the essence that animates existence. So there's, even though she uses both terms there, but you're absolutely right, Francis. In a way, you could, in theosophy at least, this describes the first and third principles, right? Which is the principle of, often related to the monad, the monadic principle of beingness, and then the third principle being the personality aspect and also intelligent activity, which is the energy behind all doingness, no matter how thin it proceeds from that. So thanks for that. Yeah. Anyone else on this, the non-being and beingness?
Nope, I don't see anything else.
Okay. Okay. All right. On to the last commentary on verse 7. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Gary, can you read that for us, please?
Certainly. In our case, the one being is the noumenon of all the noumena, which we know must underlie phenomena and give them whatever shadow of reality they possess, but which we have not the senses or the intellect to cognize at present. The impalpable atoms of gold scattered throughout the substance of a ton of auriferous quartz may be imperceptible to the naked eye of the miner, yet he knows that they are not only present there, but they alone give his quartz any appreciable value. And this relation of the gold to the quartz may faintly shadow forth that of the noumenon to the phenomenon, but the miner knows what the gold will look like when extracted from the quartz, whereas the common mortal can form no conception of the reality of things separated from the maya, which veils them and in which they are hidden. Alone, the initiate, rich with the law acquired by numberless generations of his predecessors, directs the eye of Dangmar toward the essence of things in which no maya can have any influence. It is here that the teachings of esoteric philosophy in relation to the Nidanas and the Four Truths become of the greatest importance, but they are secret.
Thoughts and questions about this? Any reflections on this interesting statement? Most of the content is in the first few lines, right? That this idea of non-being or beingness, the one which is the one being, is a noumenon of all the noumena, right? So the causeless that stands behind the causal of all manifestation, right? And then gives us this example of the hidden, that which is hidden and is of greater value in the sense of the gold and the crystal. Noumenon of all the noumena refers to the one non-being, which is the source of even those beings who stand in a causal relationship to manifested existence. we're taught that there is seemingly infinite number of causal levels, all of which are subject to and informed by the one life. HPB uses the metaphor for the atoms of gold invisibly dispersed throughout a crystal to indicate the invisible presence of the one life. Could we get a reader for this definition from the Theosophical Glossary of Dhamma, or Dhamma?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
Just a moment. Dhamma, Sensar, Tibetan, purified soul, used north of the Himalayas for one in whom the spiritual eye is active and who therefore is
Jivan Mukta.
Okay. Or high
Mahatma.
The opened eye of the dogma is used in the stanzas of Dzyan for the awakened active faculty of spiritual vision and intuition through which direct certain knowledge is obtainable, and whatever thing or subject the initiate directs his attention to. It is called in India the eye of Shiva, and by Theosophists the spiritual third eye.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, this is the Ocean Center. Thoughts or questions? So, quote, direct certain knowledge is obtainable of whatever thing or subject the initiate directs his attention to, suggests that the Ajna Center is our portal for the intuition. Okay, well, let's move on to verse 8. Can we get a reader for this?
Jeremy, can you read that for us, please? No, I'm sorry. There's a very bad distortion. Karen, can you read that for us, please? Karen? Okay.
Sounds like interplanetary interference there.
Okay. Michael, can you? There we go.
Sure.
Thank you.
Alone, the one form of existence stretched boundless, infinite, causeless, in dreamless sleep, and life pulsated unconscious in universal space, throughout that all-presence which is sensed by the opened eye of the Dhamma.
Oh, yes.
Marvelous.
Could you continue reading this first comment on this?
Yes.
And this relates, by the way, to alone the one form of existence, stretched boundless, infinite, causeless, in dreamless sleep. That's what this is addressing. Go ahead.
The tendency of modern thought is to refer to the archaic idea of a homogeneous basis for apparently widely different things. Heterogeneity developed from homogeneity. Biologists are now searching for their homogeneous protoplasm, and chemists for their protyle, while science is looking for the force of which electricity, magnetism, heat, and so forth are the differentiations. The Secret Doctrine carries this idea into the region of metaphysics and postulates a, quote, one form of existence, unquote, as the basis and source of all things.
Thank you, Michael. So, any thoughts, ideas, questions, ruminations on this section? So, even in the physical sciences, there is an urge to discover the causes of phenomena, the homogeneous unity behind the heterogeneity of which the absolute, the non-beingness, is the final ultimate source. But until science ventures into the unseen and thus unmeasurable, at least by current instruments, no true causal source will be discovered. For this is the province of the, quote, opened eye of Dangma, or Dangma. HPB's next statement reads, I'm going to read this one myself because it has some real...
Okay. Francis has his hand up, so...
Yeah, good. Yes, Francis.
Just a thought as we're talking about the spiritual eye and Dagma and the concept there that about modern thought referring to whatever it refers to. But on the causal level of the soul knows instantaneously. And therein lies the difference in metaphysics for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could say it, in some ways that the Ajna Center, which is the language that is gained through the Ajna Center, is the language of the soul, which is the intuition, which allows, being a Buddhic level, Buddhic plane quality, allows allows knowingness to permeate our quality of apprehension, rather than the mentality that we normally think of. It's and this is soul awareness. Any other thoughts, Francis, on that?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
And then Michael has his hand up.
Yo.
Oops. There. Go ahead. You're self-muted.
Okay. I think it's important to address science in particular. When the scientific revolution started in the 17th century, there was a, I think, right or correct rebellion against the excesses of religion.
Oh, right.
Okay. And it kind of went too far. The pendulum swung too far. But now the pendulum is swinging back, where psychiatrists, for instance, are not considered exact scientists because they are looking at things within the mind, within the emotions, which cannot be measured with physical instruments. We've got neuroscientists, neurologists who have experienced the near-death experience and have written about that. And they say, this happened, it's real. Exact science can't explain it. We have to look somewhere else.
Yeah, there's been more and more acceptance by a few in the scientific community. There was also Jill, somebody who was who had the stroke and was able to. She had been worked with
Right.
medically with the brain, and she was able to recognize what was actually going on and sort of map her experience between left and right brain. And yeah, and that, that wasn't happening earlier in the 20th century at all. So there's been, however, the hardcore central group of scientists,
there's an underground movement going on that is going to rise up.
Exactly. And, it's very much connected with the shift in ages. from the Piscean concretion moving into the Aquarian age. That energy is what's breaking that, as well as all other things up at this time.
So I just wanted to point out it's important to recognize that there's some what we would consider positive steps going on, perhaps in the background, but it's still happening.
Yeah. Also, it's interesting. I saw a really cool YouTube video where this physicist and this Buddhist scholar debate. And to me, what that indicated was that the physicists and physicists in general are willing to hear other points of view. I think their recent discoveries about the effects of the observer on that which is observed, which is beyond, even though the instruments recorded it, it suggested an influence beyond the physical, is allowing them to become more open to other ideas around.
It's fantastic.
Thanks, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so could we get a reader for this?
I thought you said you were going to read it.
Oh, I am going to read it. You're absolutely right. I have a big exclamation part here. Read yourself. Okay, but perhaps the phrase, the one form of existence, is not altogether correct. The Sanskrit word is prabhava piyaya. God, I practiced that 10 times. Prabhava piyaya, the place, or rather plane, which emerges the origination, and into which is the resolution of all things, says a commentator. It is not the mother of the world, as translated by Wilson, for Jagat Yoni is scarcely so much, quote, the mother of the world, or, quote, the womb of the world, as the, quote, material cause of the universe. The Puranic commentators explain it by karana, cause, but the esoteric philosophy by the ideal spirit of that cause. It is in its secondary stage the svabhavat of the Buddhist philosopher, the eternal cause and effect, omnipresent yet abstract, the self-existent plastic essence, and the root of all things, viewed in the same dual light as the Vedantin views his Parabrahm and Mula Prakriti, the one under two aspects. So yes, that's a real tongue twister. Prabhava piyaya. Any thoughts or questions about this? So a lot of Sanskrit terminology, right? But actually the concepts are straightforward enough. HPB emphasizes once again the twice removed quality of the absolute, i.e. the absolute stands in a causal relationship, even to causal realms, but though removed from them, is yet intrinsic to those realms. It is svabhavat, that is directly causal, the, quote, self-existent plastic essence and the root of all things. The absolute is alternately described as prabhava piyaya, whose definition emphasizes a plane or place beyond the causal realms rather than a being, a more accurate idea HBB is postulating, than one form of existence or mother of the world. Okay, I hope you get that distinction, that the source is not a persona, even in the abstract sense, she's suggesting here, but rather a locale or a plane, which is, also seems to me inherently limited, right? Again, you just run into this problem of language. So any thoughts about this before we move on? Okay, next up. Now this, someone else could read.
Okay, let's see. Marissa, can you read that for us, please?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. It seems indeed extraordinary to find great scholars speculating on the possibility of the Vedanta and the Uttara Minasa, especially having been evoked by the teachings of the Buddhists. Whereas it is on the contrary Buddhism of Gautama, the Buddha, that was evoked and entirely upreared on the tenets of the Secret Doctrine, of which a partial sketch is here attempted, and on which, as the Upanishads are made to rest. The above, according to the teachings of Sri Sankaracharya.
Sri Sankaracharya.
Sri Sankaracharya is undeniable.
So any thoughts about this? According to the Theosophical Glossary, Uttara Mimamsa was the sixth and final school of Hindu philosophy, and she's citing it as a high source here. We get a glimpse of the scope of the true Secret Doctrine through HPB's comment, the tenets of the Secret Doctrine, of which a partial sketch is here attempted, reminding us that when she refers to the Secret Doctrine, she is referring to a greater, largely secret work, not the manuscript that we are now studying. It's really the ancient wisdom teachings that she's talking about and giving the name Secret Doctrine here. So this is, the first part of this is she's basically saying that, pointing out that Buddhism wasn't the source of these great concepts, but was rather, this, how do I say it? Rather put it forth in its own way from a much earlier source, evoked. And let's see, what's the line here? So it's evoked and entirely upreared on the tenets of the Secret Doctrine. Secret Doctrine pre-exists Buddhism. She spends a lot of time refuting scholars of the 1880s and 90s or 70s and 80s that, in a sense, got it wrong. Okay, let's take a look at the two footnotes here. Let's see, how are we doing in terms of terminology? I think this is straightforward enough. Can we get a reader for this, please?
I'll read it.
Okay, great.
Please excuse any and all mistakes. In India, it is called the Eye of Siva or Shiva, but beyond the Great Range, it is known as Dangma's opened eye in esoteric phraseology. Dangma means a purified soul, one who has become a
Jivanmukta.
Yeah, that. The highest adept, or rather a Mahatma, so-called. His opened eye is the inner spiritual eye of the seer, and the faculty which manifests through it is not clairvoyance as ordinarily understood, i.e. the power of seeing at a distance, but rather the faculty of spiritual intuition, through which direct and certain knowledge is obtainable. This faculty is intimately connected with the third eye, which mythological tradition ascribes to certain races of men. Fuller explanations will be found in Book 2.
Thank you. Yeah, the Great Range is, of course, the Himalayas. HPB gives us a distinction between clairvoyance and inner vision here. It is, quote, not the power of seeing at a distance, but rather the faculty of spiritual intuition. Again, this idea of clairvoyance, as used in theosophy, has a different meaning than it's normally used. Okay, on to the Is there any thoughts or questions about this before we move on? About the Dangma, the eye of Dangma. Okay. Let's move on to the short commentary 8b, which references, and life pulsates unconscious in universal space throughout that all presence, which is sensed by the opened eye of Dangma, or Dangma. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. So can we get a reader for this commentary?
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Well, I see you there twice. There you go.
Okay, hello.
Yes.
What will I read? Number 8, what I see?
Yeah, just read the, starting at B, dreamless sleep is one of the 7 states.
Okay.
The
Dreamless sleep is one of the 7 states of consciousness known in Oriental esotericism. In each of these states, a different portion of the mind comes into action, or as the Vedantin would express it, the individual is conscious in a different plane of his being. The term dreamless sleep, in this case, is applied allegorically to the universe to express a condition somewhat analogous to that state of consciousness in man, which, not being remembered in awakened state, seems a blank, just as the sleep of the mesmerized subject seems to him an unconscious blank when he returns to his normal condition, although he has been talking and acting as a conscious individual would.
Thank you. So, any ideas, thoughts about this? Questions? It's straightforward enough, as long as we remember that the described dreamless sleep is not the dreamless sleep as it is understood in the West, which focuses on brainwave activity, REM, rapid eye movement, and various stages of sleep, but rather on the superconscious states wherein we contact more causal levels. That's how it's understood and seen in the East. So let's look at these rather long footnotes here. I sometimes I go around about whether to include these, but I want to include the entire Secret Doctrine. If they're not particularly relevant, we'll just move through them quickly. But usually there's something worth taking a look at. So let's, if we could get a reader for this, actually go ahead, both footnotes.
Okay. Scott, can you do that for us, please?
Sure. And yet one claiming authority, namely Sir Monier Williams, Bowdoin Professor of Sanskrit at Oxford, has just denied this fact.
Okay, what fact? Hang on, let's find out what fact he's denying here. Where is that star on this? Reference here.
It's up,
Let me go
up
back.
with the open eye at the top.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it's in the verse itself. So the live pulsation is throughout that all presence, which is so. That's what he's disputing. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. This is what he taught his audience on June the 4th, 1888, in his annual address before the Victoria Institute of Great Britain. Originally, Buddhism set its face against all solitary asceticism to maintain sublime heights of knowledge. It had no occult, no esoteric system of doctrine, right, withheld from ordinary men. And again, when Gautama Buddha began his career, the later and lower form of yoga seemed to have been little known. And then, contradicting himself, the learned lecturer forthwith informs his audience that we learn from Lalita Vistara that various forms of bodily torture, self-maceration, and austerity were common in Gautama's time. But the lecturer seems quite unaware that this kind of torture and self-maceration is precisely the lower form of yoga, Hatha yoga, which was little known, quotes, and yet so, quote, common in Gautama's lifetime. It is even argued that all the 6 darshanas, schools of philosophy, show traces of Buddha's influence, being either taken from Buddhism or due to Greek teaching. We labor under the impression that Colebrook, quote, the highest authority, unquote, in such matters, had long ago settled the question by showing that, quote, the Hindus were in this instance the teachers, not the learners, unquote.
Okay, so you can see why I'm occasionally tempted to leave out some of these footnotes. This debate, you could say, was, of course, the specific debate was much more relative in 1888 than they are today when the Secret Doctrine was written. But, you know, there are still materialists that study religions and put forth their ideas. And they, you know, they have to be countered wherever and whenever they lecture. So it's important to always to contrast the position of the Secret Doctrine from such authorities. Thanks, Scott. Well, we've come to the very last verse of the first stanza. Can we get a reader for this final verse?
Okay, we have a question from Jeremy. I would suggest there is a correlation between dreamless sleep and the delta brainwave state of consciousness. It is possible to continuously enter into dreamless sleep state, which subjectively often described as an experience of self, no self.
Yeah, it's just, you know, what is the philosophy behind that experience of self, no self in the, you know, and I think there's a difference in the West between the, you know, compared to the East, though those who are open to causal levels or the concept of there being causal levels would have a much easier time embracing, you know, the Eastern idea of dreamless sleep, you know, compared to what they do in the West. You know, a good one, you know, form of psychology that really did embrace this concept was Carl Jung. There's much of the Eastern thought in their ideas. Thank you for that. Okay.
And then Michael has his hand up, so go ahead, Michael.
Yeah.
And what aspect of ourself are we referring to as being in dreamless sleep? From the standpoint of soul, incarnation for eons, the projection of soul into form is in dreamless sleep.
Yeah. Well, DK talks about, you know, the night school, where you are taught while you sleep. You know, in fact, he even recommends, you know, don't be late, get there at 10 p.m., you know, in your local time, because that's when school starts, and then it's over at 5 in the morning, time to get up, you know. So this could be called, you know, a stage of dreamless sleep, since the dream would seems to me, would, you know, interfere with that direct teaching, which is usually not remembered. But,
you know, the idea of consciousness is a really big debate about what is consciousness, ranging all the way from there is no such thing as consciousness to everything is conscious.
Right. Yes, indeed. And that's usually where the argument settles when you get a physicist and a Buddhist scholar in the same room. The Buddhists insist that the physicist is not exploring the nature of consciousness, and that's where the limitations of physics occur. So yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Mm-hmm. May I suggest that Michael be your reader for your last thing there?
Okay. Well, let's see. Yeah, go ahead and read the 9th one.
Number 9. But where was the Dhamma when the alaya of the universe was in Paramatha and the great wheel was Anupadaka?
It's a question we ask all the time, isn't it?
Always. I was just thinking about that the other day.
It's pretty obscure stuff. To get anything at all from this verse, we'll need 4 definitions from the Theosophical Glossary. Dhamma, alaya, paramartha, and anupadaka, which are the 4 relevant terms you can see there at the top. So if we could please get a reader for this page.
Okay. Let's get an intrepid reader.
Sanskritist.
Yeah, because we have so many of those.
Yeah,
can you read for us, Trudy, please?
Trudy, the only real stumbler is Jivan Mukta, which occurs in the second line there.
So,
Jivan Mukta.
Let's start at purified soul.
I'm sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do I start with purified soul?
Just start at the top, but where was the Dhamma?
Oh, but where was the Dhamma when the alaya of the universe was in Paramatha and the great wheel was Anapuddaka? That has already been read.
Yes, it has, but I think here we have the reference for these terms.
Okay. Purified soul, used north of the Himalayas, for one in whom the spiritual eye is active and who therefore is Jivan Mukta or High Mahatma. The opened eye of the Dhamma is used in the stanzas of Dzyan for the awakened active faculty of spiritual vision and intuition, through which direct certain knowledge is obtained of whatever thing or subject the initiate directs his attention to. It is called in India the eye of Shiva, and by Theosophists the spiritual third eye. Do I read on?
Yes, alaya.
Alaya from a not, laya, dissolution from the verbal root li, to dissolve. Non-dissolution, the indissolvable, used in Buddhism for the universal soul or higher portions of anima mundi, the source of all beings and things. Mystically identical with akasa in the latter's highest elements, and with maha buddhi, also with mula prakriti as root producer or root nature. Paramatha, from parama, highest, sublime, and artha, comprehension. Aim, true or supreme self-consciousness, also a great mystic work, which according to legend is said to have been delivered to Nagarjuna by ancient initiates. Anupadaka, self-produced, spontaneously generated, one who is self-born by reason of his own intrinsic energy, without parents or predecessors from which his existence or activities are derived, applied therefore to certain self-evolving gods. In Buddhism, used with particular reference to the Dhyani Buddhas, who issue forth from Adi Buddha without intermediate agency.
Thank you. So when we bring these definitions into the context of the question, that is verse 9, we have something like 9, but where was the active faculty of spiritual vision when the universal soul was in a state of supreme self-consciousness and the great wheel had yet to be self-produced? Not a question you hear every day. Said more simply, where was the opened eye of Dhamma when the universal soul had become one with the absolute? And of course, as you move up in consciousness to higher levels, this is going to continuously unfold the meaning of this verse, as would be true of many of these verses, right? So this seemingly rhetorical question was posed in connection with verse 8. Using the modified version of verse 9, together they read, alone the one form of existence stretched boundless, infinite, causeless, in dreamless sleep, and life pulsated unconscious in universal space throughout that all-presence which is sensed by the opened eye of Dhamma. But where was the opened eye of Dhamma when the universal soul had become one with the absolute? Okay, now let's move on to a commentary on verse 9. We'll just take this portion and that'll be it for today. So if we could get a reader for this first section, which has to do with where was the Dhamma when the alaya of the universe, soul as the basis of all anima mundi, was in Paramartha. So could we have a reader, please?
Vera, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yes, because I was muted by the organizer. Here we have before us the subject of centuries of scholastic disputations. The two terms, alaya and paramartha, have been the causes of dividing schools and splitting the truth into more different aspects than any other mystic terms. Alaya is literally the soul of the world, or anima mundi, the oversoul of the person. And according to esoteric teaching, it changes periodically its nature. Alaya, through eternal and changeless, in its inner essence on the planes which are unreachable by either man or cosmic gods, Dhyani Buddhas, alters during the active life period with respect to the lower planes, ours included. During that time, not only the Dhyani Buddhas are one with alaya in soul and essence, but even the man strong in the yoga mystic meditation is able to merge his soul with it. Arya Sangha, the Bhumapa school, this is not nirvana, but a condition next to it, hence the disagreement.
So any thoughts or questions about this statement? Most of the statement is defines alaya. If you set this disputation aside, which we're told is the world soul or anima mundi, and that this is changeless on the higher planes, but alters in relation to the, quote, active life period with respect to the lower planes. Okay, we're coming on a quarter to the hour. So I think we'll stop here and pick up again, we'll read this section next time. We'll start with the beginning of the 9th verse. And next time we'll be finishing the first shloka. See, let's take a look. Go back one here. Oh, to go way back. Here we go. Yeah, so this is 9, and we'll do a kind of seat of the pants review of all these 9, not through the commentary, but sometimes you get so deep in the forest that you can lose the sense of why are all these 9 listed together? What is their import that makes them a stanza? And so we'll get some sense of some synthesis, some idea of their interrelationship on after we finish with 9 next time. So until then, thank you all again for attending. Let's see, let me click on my little side panel. And yeah, we had, I think, up to 33 at one time today. That's great. And hope to see you all next time, which will be
the 24th, the 24th of February.
24th of February, that's just 4 weeks. So until then, have a great winter unless you're in the southern hemisphere. So thank you for attending, and until then, bye now. Bye for now.
Good night, good day, good morning, everybody.
Bye-bye.